Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Andy Overton, Terrence Moore, and Henry House. And the flip side starts right now. Welcome to the show. This is our 2020 election edition. So guys, let's talk a little bit about your voting experience. Henry, let's start with you. What was your experience like here in Washington County?
I went early voting. It was, I believe, Tuesday we went out to vote. I think I touched on it last week, but it was hour and 15 minutes waiting in line. It was efficient. I say kudos to our local board of elections because I think they did everything they could to try to make you feel safe. If you couldn't stand in line, they offered a proxy to hold your place in line and let you sit down and rest. If you couldn't go in, they had alternative ways that they could handle your ballot. I think that's the really positive thing that we can take is that they put a lot of thought and effort into getting us set up so we could vote safely. And, the provisional ballots and the absentee ballots that they mailed out to people, I know they're still working on that today as we speak, but, I haven't heard any squawking in the community regarding any issues that anyone had.
Right. Andy, did you early vote or did you vote on election day?
No, I early voted, and I dropped my ballot off. I dropped my mother's ballot off so that she, as an immunocompromised person, did not have to stand in line. The ballot boxes were great, and I agree, Henry. I think our Board of Elections did an absolutely fabulous job so far. I've heard of nothing either. And I've even heard that when people were standing in line, they were joking with each other. They were happy to be there even when it was cold and it was rainy. And I think that just means that folks in Washington County take their voting rights serious, and we were able, I think, to offer different safe, legal, ethical ways for them to cast their vote, and it was great.
Yeah. Terrence, how did you vote?
I voted by mail. So I filled in my ballot at home, dropped it in my mailbox, and did it with confidence. But I too heard that those who were in line, that it was a social event. You got to think that for a lot of people, that was the first time they came out of their house and been around that large group of people since COVID. So to do so, to exercise their right was great for the community as well.
Yeah. For me, I saw old clients there. I had conversations. I talked sports. It was really a great time. And I believe our community doesn't match what we see in the media in regards to our divisions. I think my experience was there's more that makes us in common than divides us. And my hat's off to Barry and his team at the Board of Elections. They did a wonderful job. The volunteers were excellent. The way that they helped the elderly and made sure that they didn't have to stand in line if they weren't able, getting them seating. The way they explain, you don't need your ID in Maryland. However, but if you used your ID, it very well may move you along faster because sometimes it's hard to hear you between your mask and also the plexiglass that they had up. So I just thought that Washington County did a tremendous job under the circumstances, and kudos to them on that. Let's look a little bit at the national election. As of the taping of this show, we still have some uncertainty there in regards to what the outcome is going to be. But looking at what we know right now, what would you say Trump's biggest mistakes were in this campaign? Andy?
Yeah. I think the manner in which he ran his divisive and angry campaign ignited the left-hand side to come out and vote, to rally, to find ways to make sure that they broke down hurdles of voter suppression. And the left side, did everything they could to get folks to the voting booth in all cities and across all states. I think his mistake was being pessimistic and angry, and it literally put a fire underneath the Democrats and a lot of the independents, and really pushed them to make sure that they made a plan to vote, they found their friends, they made phone calls for people in other states, and they did everything they could to make sure that Trump was not reelected. His mistake was divisiveness.
Henry, did Trump make any mistakes in your eyes?
No different than the rhetoric that he used to win the office the first time. And where we saw the differences in the outcome of this election, the female votes, he received a lower percentage, and a drastically lower percentage. He really turned off suburban females in the voting percentage, and that may be his ultimate downfall in the kerplunk of his campaign. He did better with minorities. He did better in the Hispanic side. He did better with the black community. Now, it's interesting when we look at the Hispanic side, the Cuban Americans really seemed like they supported, we saw the numbers out of Miami-Dade. That was absolutely shocking. But then we look at Arizona, and the Hispanic vote in Arizona didn't turn out on his side like they did down in Miami-Dade. So it's interesting. I mean, there's still no dust has settled. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff being kicked up over the next week, maybe more. But I think that was where he needed to craft a message that was more broader, because now he needed to bring us together, because we just went through a very tough time with COVID. We're still underneath the COVID, and he needed to be seen more as a unifier. And he was still campaigning as, I'm outside of this. And I think some of Biden's punches landed regarding the COVID, even though I don't believe it's true. I think some of Biden's punches regarding the actions that he took during COVID, more people were finding Biden trustworthy in that than they did Trump.
I would agree with you there, and I would also say that some of Trump's punches on Biden landed, right, in regards to him indicting him as a socialist, which I would also push back and say aren't true as well.
I don't think Biden is a socialist. I think members of the Biden's team would be questionable, and I would definitely earmark they lean much further left than what Biden does. I think Biden is more of a mainstream Democrat, but he was pulled left in order to win his party nomination.
Terrence, what did you say about Trump and any mistakes that he may have brought to the table?
And just to kind of address that as far as what happened in Florida and the voters that came out, Hispanic voters, the impact there was about the socialism. A lot of those individuals came from countries where they seen socialism wasn't in their best interest. So to paint Biden and his party as socialists kind of probably turned those votes a little bit more in that Hispanic communities. As far as what he did wrong, honestly, I think the impact of what he did wrong would be felt in years to come. I think he set expectations about what's going to happen with COVID, which may be unrealistic. Making accusations of fraud impacts our voting strategy. So I think some of that will be long lasting and is going to be hard to recover from. Outside of that, he ran a campaign. He was everywhere. Those rallies, he entertained. He got out there and he mobilized people to come out and vote on election day as well. So that's where you see a lot of his impact, a lot of his numbers coming back, people who came out and voted.
Yeah. So let's turn this around. Let's talk about Biden a little bit. The one thing I saw in regards to Biden that the Trump campaign really hammered him with was the 1994 crime bill. They really hammered him with that in regards to the campaign. And I really don't think that Biden had an answer that many blacks and minorities was acceptable or palatable for them. So that very well may have helped Trump in regards to some of those numbers. Mistakes of Biden.
Wow. So, one of the things that I think he did early was he let Trump be Trump. He did. He kind of sat back during COVID and he let the right side have their rallies and their parties and whatnot. And what I would have liked to have seen is he come out of that a little bit. I'm not saying he's got to come out with a full-on attack, but I think he was quiet for too long. And I think that pushed some people on the fence, and then he had a battle to get those folks back. On that socialist issue, that is such a great point, Terrence, and I think you're right. And I think he could have done a better job in southern Florida. Now, the good news for Biden is that idea that those folks coming from a socialist country who did not have a great experience are really, I think, only pertaining to southern Florida voters. We don't see that in Arizona. We obviously aren't going to see that in Southern California. So I'm just saying that I think he could have done a little bit better of a job to help prevent or talk about that a little bit more, and he stayed quiet too long. I think he should have come out just swinging a little bit Maybe that's just a confrontational person in me, that I wanted him to come out and say, this is wrong, here's where I stand, here's what's going to happen when you vote for me, here's how I'm going to heal this country. And I think he waited.
Yeah. Henry.
You know, I sit back and I look at it, and where I think that, you know, one, yes, I think Biden needed to be out more. If he was out more, it could have swayed it either way, depending upon which Joe Biden got behind the podium. Because he had some appearances that he didn't even state which office he was running for correctly. And brings a big question mark in your head. Is he competent enough to be our president? We're going, you know, we may find out, we may not find out, but those are big question marks that you have, and so I think, you know, he needed to be out there. I think his only thing he could do was complain about Trump. The entire, oh well, Trump did this, Trump did that. Dude, you have 45 plus years. Okay, you have stuff being pinned up against you. Now, some of the rhetoric happened, you know, a couple of days before the elections, going out there with the stuff regarding his son and the allegations. Maybe he wasn't involved with them, maybe he wasn't. But for those who were turning out on election day, did that have a sway in which way they were going to cast their vote? Did they think that this was another Clinton-esque thing of FBI saying, well, yeah, we have concerns, and which probably led to Trump being elected back 4 years ago? Did we say we're not going to get fooled a second time? How did that really play into the role? You know, whoever ends up winning, it doesn't make any, ultimately, that individual will be my president. And so you have to respect and you have to hope that they do the best for the country. No one runs for president and doesn't love their country. So, you know, if Joe Biden's the president, then he is our commander in chief. I wish him all the success in the world. And the same thing with Donald Trump. And I hope, you know, my other panelists feel the same.
I'll say this to kind of wrap up this piece. You have two 70-plus-year-old white men that are set in their ways. I don't see either one of them showed any ability to be other than who they are. They came in as known commodities, one in politics for 40-plus years, but the other one has been on our TV screen for many years as well. And I saw neither one of them willing to change, or they just said, we're going to run our campaigns and be exactly who we are. And in the coming days, we're going to find out which one of those worked. But to that end, what does this election say about our country? Terrence.
This was defeating from a moral standpoint. I think the expectation of it somewhat going to be a landslide, that Biden was going to win commandingly, and that kind of tone. One, we all know polls are completely off, right? And I think they're reckless to a point of voters, because I think some voters may not have come out because they thought an outcome was foregone. But also from a standpoint where you see the social issues we had in our country, we've seen loved ones die and become sick based on poor decision making by our leaders. Honestly, I think a lot of people believed it was going to be a landslide, and it didn't turn out that way. So that was a little disheartening, because not saying that everyone who voted for Trump is a racist, but it's a narrative out there, and it's not a great narrative, but it still impacts the morale of a lot of people who swore that there was going to be a huge shift in how we voted.
Yeah. What I see from social media, we can no longer be civil. I don't see any intelligent debate about policies anywhere. It is mudslinging, and both sides are crooks, and no real talking about the issues. Like, was this an issues-based campaign to you?
Yeah, no, so, okay. So, yeah, so if we want to talk about issues to me are like economic policy, foreign policy, how we're going to like solve homelessness inside of cities. What issues aren't are my individual rights to marry my girlfriend, for my ability to have health care, for my ability to live the life freely as an authentically gay woman, those are off the table for me. So if someone's going to fight back and say, you may not do that, we are no longer having a civil conversation about policies. We are now having a conversation about who has human rights and who does not. And I think that's where I draw the line, right? I can talk about economic policy all day long. We can talk about foreign policy. Should we go to war? Should we not? We should talk about how much money can be budgeted. Fine. But when you get to those human rights, that's when everyone should say, of course you have the human right to live your life as authentically as you are, as a black man, as a gay woman, as whomever you choose to be or you were born to be. And when that comes into play, you're right, I get hostile. You're absolutely correct. And I will fight for those rights, from here until my dying breath, because it's no longer about policy. It's about being able to live just like everybody else. And I think that's where that divisiveness comes through. So please, I hope we can talk about policies. I hope we can talk about the way that we govern our country so that folks like me, like you, like everybody else can have that voice, can stand up and say, here's what I believe, without thinking that we then have to fight for the very life we want to live. That's the difference for me.
And I believe some of those things you spoke about, those social issues, felt like pandering. And it felt like there's pandering every election year. We're not talking about economic policy. We're not hearing a plan of how we're going to recover from COVID. We're not hearing a strategic plan that we expect for our commander in chief. We're at war right now with healthcare. We're at war right now with so many things economically in our community. So our commander in chief should be putting together a game plan for how we're going to recover from this. What's going to be in place? And I'm not hearing those things. What I'm hearing is, I support black people. Great.
Wow.
You shouldn't have to say that. And that's pandering to me, because again, you don't say that the years after you're elected. And we're not hearing that. We hear about our social issues and what you like about us and as individuals. I don't want to hear that. Give me a plan. Tell me how you're going to address the system. Tell me what you're going to put in place. Tell me what policy, what laws you're going to enact. What are you going to fight for once you get elected? That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing these ideas of grandeur that just say, I like you and I'm going to take care of you. No, tell me how.
Right. Henry, what does this election say to you?
It says that I feel both parties are ill-equipped to deal with the citizens that support them. Okay, whether it be in local politics, which we're going to touch on later in the show, or we go all the way up to the national scene. We are not listening to the people that put them in office. Okay, when we're going out there and we're casting our vote, and when you have a candidate that says, listen, if you don't vote for me, then there's something wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with, Andy, if you didn't cast a vote for Donald Trump, which I know you didn't, there's nothing wrong with you, okay? It's okay to have differences of opinion. My goodness, we have a whole lot more in common for the success of our nation. Terrence, you know more about what's important to the city of Hagerstown and our community growth because you're more in touch with what's going on there than a state leader or a national leader. This is where we need to have and engage. We're not engaging with the local civics groups who know what's going on in the community and how we can best address those needs. We have completely ignored that, and both sides are guilty of it, okay? It's odd that every 2 years, congressmen come here, oh, I love you, and put their arms around you, we're gonna help your community. And listen, they might pop in once or twice in that 2-year span, but have they really helped us in our community? Okay, senators, every 6 years, president every 4 years. We are missing the ball. Our elected officials across the board are failing their constituents. And until they start to open their ears and listen, we're headed down a road of no return.
No, but wait, hold on a minute though. So interestingly enough, I don't need a president to come to Hagerstown every time there's a presidential race. I need to see what that president's policies are and their exact plan, how it's going to affect my life. There's how many, 350 million people in the United States? There's no way he's going to get to every town, right?
No, there's not.
There's no way. So why not? I'm fine with that. Like, I don't need to see my president sitting at a diner across from me just because I live in Hagerstown. What I need to see is the actionable items that actually affect my life in my town. And that's what I haven't seen with this presidency. And that's what I see more with Joe Biden. That's what I see more with David Trone. And so when you get down to those senatorial races, who's got the offices in town and then who actually shows up here? I've seen David Trone more in the last 2 years than I ever did when I lived in other places in Maryland. That does say something to me. He's got a smaller population to hit. But again, can you act on what you preach? What I'm interested in is what's happening when they go back to their office, when they raise their hand, when they take that vote, and then they start voting in their own committees. What is happening there? Does it match what they're telling me? And if the answer is yes, then my life is better. End story.
But it's better because they're voting the way you want them to vote. If they go back and they vote a way that's contrary to the way if they go back and they're two-faced and they say, well, listen, I support the gay rights community,
sure,
and then they go cast votes that is in opposition to the benefit of the gay rights community, I have an issue with that. Even though I believe that you should have your rights, okay, at the same point, you have to be an individual of your word. So if you're going to go down there and you're going to throw appeasement here, then when you get down there, you have to also do the same work when you're in D.C.
Yeah, so we're saying the same thing, is to be able to walk the talk that you had in your community. Now, I have no idea what it's like to be a black man or woman in this country, but I will sure as heck be able to vote for someone who addresses the policies that makes life better for someone who doesn't look like me. And you're right, if they go back to their office and they go back to their voting in committees and they don't do that, then yes, then they don't represent my views. Like, I get that. But I think I can care about someone who doesn't have my same experiences just as much as the experiences for me from my elected people.
Okay, we've complained a bit. Now we got to go to the other side. We got to talk solutions. What's going to fix it? Let me kick this off. We got to get money out of politics.
How?
you like the $10 million that was tossed into Texas for the senator race, $7.5 million for the presidential race, and and it's fantastic that people have these resources that they can give to support their given candidates. But what it does, it creates a toxicity within the political system. It should be local contributions that support the local races. And then all of a sudden, we're not doing multi-million-dollar campaigns, okay? $100 million for a Senate seat in North Carolina or South Carolina. Come on, what is wrong with people? This is absolutely ludicrous. We don't want them beholden to someone who's on Wall Street or someone who's in Silicon Valley. We want them beholden to someone that is in Hagerstown.
Yes.
Okay, if I write a contribution check to any of the candidates, I'm not doing it to buy privilege. I'm doing it because I believe in them. And that's what you get when you get local contributions. And the only way we're ever going to address that is by getting a constitutional amendment, because they've already struck down campaign finance laws in the past. So the only way to clean this system up, and I don't think anyone has the fortitude in D.C. to fight the PACs on that.
I think that's something that needs to come from we the people. What say you, Terrence?
I agree. We know it's blatant. You're buying influence. Some of the largest lobbyists and some of the largest companies have found every loophole possible to still give money, and then give above the standards that are already set there, because we also have PACs where you can blindly and call themselves nonprofit PACs, where you don't even have to disclose who actually gave that money. So there's loopholes that have honestly been created to avoid the law. So money is power. And that's what people are exercising, and that's what people are seeing. And this is why people are losing interest and losing respect for our government. Because if I don't have the money, and it's between the have and have-nots, why does my vote count? And that's the message we're sending by letting these campaign funds come in. When you sit there and you're sitting there and you can't feed your family, and you watch billions of dollars be put into rallies, campaigns, and parties and jets to get your vote, when you just need a piece of that to survive, that's disgusting.
I got nothing to say after that. No, I pass. I think I've said enough on other topics, but
So let's talk about our media a little bit, right? If anything, what needs to be fixed with our media? And here's what I'll say. I think that we the people have to take more responsibility for the complaints that we have about the media. Because here's what I see. I see someone who watches Fox News complain about all the other channels that they don't watch. But at the same time, when Fox News is covering a story and they're beating it to death, they're upset that the other channels aren't covering Hunter Biden, and vice versa. I think that we as a people need to become better consumers, where we need to give our eyeballs to more than just the channel or the avenues that are going to tell us and reinforce the beliefs that we already have. Andy, what say you?
Yeah, let's be more transparent, right? And I think there's sensationalism and I think there's journalism. And I think it's really, really hard to find that line sometimes. But also I think that we need to empower and provide resources, non-biased resources. I'd love a page that has nothing but facts, and I have found those. And then let me make that decision by myself, right? I don't need Rachel Maddow, I don't need Sean Hannity telling me what I think. So when these stories come down, I do a little research, right? I try and find those real facts of what they're really saying. And most of the time, the facts are a little skewed from one way or the other. So I think we need to empower people to find resources to make their own decisions and make sure we are not just watching one TV show a night, and that's where we get all of our end-all information.
Terrence.
No, I agree. We're not consumers, we're the product.
Yeah,
and that's what you got to understand as well. We are the product. We're being sold and passed along, and media is just the marketing tool to do it. Absolutely, there's great information out there that is true, factual, and doesn't have a slant. But the price of that is time to go search it out, read it, and do the research for it. And also, it speaks at an education level that most people in this country, unfortunately, don't have. So the cheapest way is to get it marketed to you by your news source, who is more about entertaining you than providing you information. You watch these news segments, they're chasing ratings. They're not just giving news and giving facts. They're putting their emotions in it. You watch some of these reporters joke around, take shots at candidates, take shots at that's not your job. You're paid to provide me with information so I know what's going on in this world and I can make an informed decision when I vote. That's not what's happening.
Now, I'm old enough that I remember a day when the TV said breaking news.
It meant something?
It meant something. Everything stopped.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember that, like, whoa, boy, be quiet. You know, that type of thing. Breaking news now is every minute about everything.
But don't we essentially have diarrhea of journalism, quote, journalism? They're targeting their market because they want to generate ad revenue and make a profitability, okay? It's CNN proxy, okay? CNN was the first 24/7 news source. Everyone tried to copy off of them. Some went to the right, some went to the left, but you know, we now have news 24/7, 365. We have it available on our cell phone, which we didn't have 30 years ago. We have it available on our computers, and we are inundated to the point that we are desensitized from the important facts. They are looking to get Procter & Gamble or whatever major sponsor to keep signing on the dotted line and putting that check in so that they make their quarterly earnings. Ratings are part of that, okay? And you can see that. Bill O'Reilly got pushed off the air because he did some things inappropriate because he lost his sponsors. It wasn't because, Fox News was opposed to him. He lost his sponsors. He was no longer a cash cow for him. That's why Bill O'Reilly wasn't on the air anymore. So you look at things, and this is the problem that we have in all of our society. We are so inundated with news, it's no longer news. We have lost the ability to critically think and digest information. And until we start to get that, okay? Facebook doing fact checks. Listen, I don't need you to fact check. Let me do my own research and put my own information up. If it's wrong, it's wrong. I'm sorry. But somebody else, if you read my Facebook post, you may say, well, Henry's off his rocker. Okay? And you're entitled to that. But that's part of the conversation that we have eliminated from society is the ability to converse, have different opinions, and still be friends when we're done.
I agree with that, except for when it comes to our political officials. I believe there's a different level of accountability of telling the truth to the public. And when you are purposely trying to deceive the public, I believe there needs to be some controls in place. So let's talk social media now. My issue with social media is that we don't share information, we share memes. We don't share white papers, from the Heritage Foundation. We share memes. And memes become facts. And I believe that's dangerous because it dumbs down the conversation. And we've talked about the central committees and how they share memes and the foolishness that they do. And sometimes they're mean, they're hateful. Andy.
I'm going to totally steal Terrence's line right now, and I'm sorry, except that social media is entertainment. Social media is not journalism. And so if we share memes and funny stuff or whatnot, that's because it's entertainment. It's like walking into Universal Studios. It's not like walking into a serious journalistic newsroom, wherever that exists. So yeah, if you get your only facts from Facebook and Twitter, you're probably missing a whole lot of what's really happening. And if you get your facts only from social media and don't fact check anything, and social media does not fact check you, the difference there, I think, Henry, is that social media has millions and millions of users that you can scroll through, right? Where our news folks, it's one person reporting on things. So you're right, you should be able to check your own facts on, say, Maddow or Hannity, but on Facebook, if you have 37 people reposting the same thing that's wrong, I think that Facebook has a responsibility to say, this is complete horse puppy.
Then Facebook is no longer a social media. They are now a news outlet. And
No.
they have eliminated our ability to communicate in a manner. They are editing what we post. So if they want to get into that business, then fine, be into that business.
Yeah,
but
no,
they shouldn't have the.
Not-
you can disagree all you want, but I disagree with you on that.
Yeah, great, but disagree
So,
only in that they're not editing your posts. They're saying what's factual and what isn't.
but they're saying what's factual based upon their quote fact checkers when they've actually it's skewed along the lines that they want it skewed. I mean, when you go through and you have the President of the United States do a post, and you say, well, this is not contextual correct. Who are they? The president has a lot more knowledge, and if they want to put something out there in that regard and say, but to block what a person does, to block what a news media might post up about an article, it makes you question when a lot of people are using social media as their media outlets now. Their attention span is, read the first paragraph and then I'll decide whether I want to read the rest. Okay, so you have them for 10 to 15 seconds and that's it. So they'll jump out with those headlines and, they're saying, well, no, this isn't wrong. I shared a post that was actually funny. Okay, it was funny about the cow grates that you have on farms and the cows not walking across. I knew it was a joke. I didn't put it out as this was true. I shared it because I saw it somewhere else. All of a sudden, 2 weeks later, oh, well, this is factually incorrect. Guys, get a life. Okay, I'm sorry. It's a joke. It wasn't to disparage anybody. It was a joke.
But your post stood, right? It wasn't taken down.
It now has a label over top saying,
Right.
oh, well, this is, in fact, this is not.
So would have been
So
better
who are
if it
they to
said,
tell me that
this
I'm
is
wrong?
a joke? Because it's not
But,
factual.
they have people who put things that, this is a satire site, but when they go to put information on there, their Facebook checked and said, oh, no, this is, in fact, this is wrong. And I know a couple people who live in the community who do that. And they've been flagged by Facebook.
Facebook is optional, right?
Yes.
Right.
So you don't have to be on there.
Right.
But we do understand that we have children and people who aren't informed enough who may make bad decisions based on incorrect information. You may be able to decipher whether it's right and what's wrong and how to react accordingly. But we have seen people react in ways that was not safe for the people around them as well because they took something as law. So we have to have some kind of accountability and be responsible for all those people who are participating in this venue, in this platform. Now, the worst thing that can happen is someone saying, hey, what he's joking about isn't true. I think we're okay with that. That's just a warning label. And I'm okay with that when I know that somebody could take that and pass that misinformation or share that continuously and skew how people really think about an issue. So no one wants censorship. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. But Facebook is an option, a platform for you to attend and to socialize. Same way if you were going to a nightclub. If you don't like the nightclub's rules about your dress code, right, don't go to the nightclub. But the reason for that dress code is to make sure that a certain element, that a certain level of clientele is showing up to that place. and that everyone there feels safe when they come there. So I get it. Trust me. But if it's something that's wrong, it's wrong. Now, if they shut it down and they take it off, then that's fine. You know, but
well, fortunately, I've never been in Facebook jail. Okay,
some people have.
A lot of people have, and you know, some of them are my friends. You know, I hopefully no one at this table has ever been in Facebook jail. But the bottom line is, you know, anyone out there in the real world that's friends with me on social media and you don't have the ability for critical thinking, do me a favor. Just skip through my posts. Yep. Okay?
which is an option.
It's not, because a lot of my stuff, some of the stuff is personal that I share. Okay? I'm doing home improvements, so I'm showing what I'm doing. Some of the stuff is satire. Okay? Because I think we need to be able to laugh at ourselves. And, both sides of the aisle. We've lost our sense of humor in this society. We need to start getting it back. So I'll get off the foot.
I'm going to watch your page a little bit closer now and start critiquing what you have going on.
Go right ahead.
Fact checking your posts over there. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We're going to jump right back into our 2020 election edition. And let's talk about our city races. Let's start with our mayoral race. Obviously, Emily Keller is our mayor-elect. She pretty handily beat Michael Barnes. What do you have to say about that race, Henry?
I talked to a few people on the Republican side, before the election. It's not a surprise. I mean, give credit. Mike Barnes went out and he knocked a whole heck of a lot of doors. But Emily Keller is a very well-known commodity. People like her. She has a great personality. And the bottom line is, I think Emily Keller is going to be a fine mayor for the city of Hagerstown regardless. Okay? I don't necessarily share her same opinions on things, but I think Emily Keller can be a benefit to the city of Hagerstown.
Now, the Republican Central Committee had a video up, and she was referred to as the most liberal mayor in the city's history. Do you agree with that?
I cannot condone what the Republican committee puts up. Please don't ask me to do that. Okay, we share a lot of commonalities and beliefs, but at the same point, what we had talked about earlier about mudslinging and getting down, I don't believe that the citizens want politics like that. I think we should elevate our game and we should talk about the attributes of a candidate. We can talk about what the differences are, but to smear somebody and demean somebody, I think is hurtful for the political process. That's why people don't trust the political process. And I think, I didn't see the video, I'll be honest, okay? I'm not a city resident, so a lot of what took place within the city of Hagerstown is, I observe it, but I don't participate in it. But, I know Emily Keller personally. I know Mike Barnes personally. Both, I think, are fine individuals. But Emily Keller has worked hard for the city for a while, and she deservedly won the vote.
Got it. Now, Andy, you competed against both of these individuals. What say you about this race?
Yeah, I sure did. So here's what I'll say is that I ran for mayor because I thought I would be a very fine mayor and I thought I could do a better job. I never thought that Emily Keller would do a bad job. I think that this city will be just fine. I think she has some great ideas, and I'm excited to see what she can do with the city of Hagerstown. I called her today and congratulated her on a proposed win, I guess, was 60%. I think this was like the worst kept secret in Hagerstown, right? I think we pretty much knew when she filed that everything for other candidates like myself was going to be an uphill battle. And if anybody isn't excited about this, I think you got your head under a rock. I think that what the city is saying and what the residents are saying is we want someone new, and that someone new needs to have a little bit of experience behind them, and Emily Keller is it. So let's see what happens in 4 years.
Yeah. Terrence, are these races really nonpartisan?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And to go back to what you said about Emily Keller, she's been a supporter of Democrats openly. Not to tear anything about it down, but that's who she's represented. She's it's social media, it's been public. So if you openly celebrate that, and same thing with Mike Barnes as far as the Republican side, it's not. you know who they represent, you know who they support. Even when they door knock, they even represent those in races that aren't. So I think it's completely clear of which side, who's an R and who's a D. And unfortunately, it doesn't help the election process. Might as well say what it is,
Right.
let them run, be transparent, and push it forward, because it's happening anyway. Now, what it does impact are those few people who don't know, who aren't clear, and who make those decisions. So, but the majority of people who are voting knows who's a Republican, knows who's a Democrat, and each candidate in some way or another makes it known themselves as well.
And on your point, what is the makeup between Democrats and Republicans in the city of Hagerstown?
A little over 50% of Democrats. There's a high independent.
Okay.
And
So,
then-
but Republicans make up 35 to 40%.
It's a wicked purple district, right?
Right.
With a
So
large
if
independent
you're
middle.
going at it from a Republican side, and you go
Stole the
embrace
words out of my mouth. Yep.
and you embrace the Republican platform, you are already fighting an uphill battle.
Right.
So that's what the Republican Central Committee decided to do, and get out there in front of the things. And I think it's wonderful that they want to support candidates who have an R beside their name. But did they go too far in supporting to the detriment of their candidates? Okay, could Mike Barnes potentially perform better if he wouldn't have been so closely affiliated with the Republican Party, because he was in a very, very challenging race to begin with? Okay, Emily Keller is well known as she's a strong Democrat, and it's no secret. City of Hagerstown, strong Democrat. So by him going that route, did that actually hurt his campaign for success?
Yeah.
Well, I agree with that, and I think that some of the attacks of the Republican Central Committee on Emily were unfair and were in poor taste, and that didn't help them in the shellacking that they had. So let's look at the numbers a little bit in regards to the voting numbers. What I'm seeing here in the voting numbers is that this race followed the national race, where more election day votes came in for Republicans because more Republicans were voting on election day. But when you start looking at mail-in votes, Emily she tore him apart. I mean, she had 2,849 votes mail-in, and Barnes only had 937. What do those numbers say to you, Terrence?
They say the message that came down from the top down. The Republican Party was adamant about coming out on election day and was against mail-in voting. The Democrats were saying vote any way you can, by any means necessary. And that showed up in the numbers. And we're seeing, like you said, nationally as well, a lot of mail-in votes happen. As well as you think about voter suppression. Honestly, mail-in voting was combats voter suppression, which we see mainly in some of our minorities who truly represent the Democratic Party. So if I can drop my ballot in the mailbox and not feel intimidated at the polling stations, that's what I'm going to do. So I think it's a microcosm of what we've seen across the country.
Yeah. So let's move on to City Council, where we had some upsets and some historic moves. The way the numbers sit right now, the top vote getter was newbie Tierra Burnett to the political process was number one, followed by Christian Alshire, and then followed by Takesha Martinez and Shelley McIntyre, who are tied, and they look to be solidly in at this point. And then the death matches between our former mayor Bob Brucci and Peter Perini, where it looks like Bob has roughly about 1,600 vote lead, somewhere in that range in regards to where we're going. Now, what I've seen of where we're headed is there are 6,000 mail-in votes to be counted, where the majority of them, over 50% of them, are Democrats, roughly about 28% of them are Republicans, and the rest of them are independent. So to me, that would bode well, since this is a partisan election, that this would bode well for Peter Perini. What say you?
Well, here's a challenge. Bob Brucci has had a name recognition in the community, having served as mayor on numerous occasions. I think that plays well into his hand. Peter Perini has a lot of name recognition, partly because his father, owned several businesses in the community, and Peter was a part of that. So he has name recognition, but Peter's also run for other offices, and I don't know if that, because of the lack of success in running for other offices, might play a little bit into holding back some of the vote that another candidate that would be equally tied with Brucey would benefit from. So, I know both individuals. Peter's a great guy, but I think he has some different challenges than, let's say, if we jump down to a couple other names that are lower on this list or higher on this list. He has different challenges because of his name recognition in the community. Is that a bonus or is that a detriment? And Terrence, what do you think?
No, I believe Peter Perini is a career politician who's never been a politician, unfortunately. He's run a lot. He just recently ran against Senator Quarterman, and that wasn't a friendly campaign. So there's some sting that probably carried over from that as well. Brucey is another career politician. He's held office a lot of times. And we talked about people wanting to see some new faces, to see some change. So to see them at the tail end, it makes sense to me. I think the name recognition is less about name recognition, but name fatigue. You're tired of seeing these same names, the same people all the time, and nothing's changed. So let me put somebody else in there. And even somebody else in there that I may not even truly recognize, and you've never seen before, probably never heard of in some cases, until they knocked on your door or you've seen that they were running. So I believe they also carry with them some history that people had to take into account when they went out and voted.
Yeah. Now, to me, these numbers say that the city of Hagerstown wanted change. And they wanted change, and they wanted change right now. And they're electing 2 African-American women that are first-time newbies in this process. The other thing that I saw in these numbers is, Brenda Cham received more votes than Austin Heffernan. What does that say in regards to the Republican Party? Because it seems to me locally, the only Republican that has been elected at this point has been Shelley McIntyre. Do you see this as a repudiation of our local party?
Maybe a little bit, or just really bad political strategy. Plain and simple, they played their hands wrong and they got burnt. And that's what it looks like to me. Even going back to the mayor race, you have Emily Keller, who has more votes in early voting, election day, and by mail than Michael Barnes. All of them. She cleaned up on all of those. And then you have the Republican Party actively going out and trying to hand out Brenda Cham's information along with Michael Barnes. Instead of maybe backing Austin Heffernan. I don't understand that strategy at all. And I saw it. I saw it in the neighborhood. I saw it in the community. This is what was happening. So I don't understand that. And clearly, whatever they were betting on didn't work out. Didn't work out in the mayor race. It's not working out in putting the Republicans on the city council, other than Shelley McIntyre, who's done, I think, a great job with this city and ran on her own accord and ran on her own record. And so I think that's a little bit different. So yeah, I think their political strategy failed.
And let's say
Clearly.
Shelley was never elected.
Correct.
This was her first campaign as well. So, and to campaign for the first time with a partial term behind you as well, showed that she had the ability to kind of gain some swell. And she hasn't been the traditional Republican either, if you want to really paint the picture of what you think a Republican is, in some cases. So I think she's worked with it and had been collaborative in some ways with a number of different people in the community, a number of different companies in the community. She's a business owner, which also plays into support as well, especially when small businesses are where they're at right now. So I think she had a lot going for her in this race to support. And also just want to point out, and I maybe splitting hairs as well, but Takesha Martinez is not only African American, but also of Hispanic descent. If her grandfather being Cuban. So that is also a milestone that came across in this race as well that probably needs to be celebrated.
Absolutely.
But real quick, Rez, if you said there's 6,000 votes as of this taping on Wednesday night, right?
Yes.
Brooke Grossman's only 6,000 votes that have not been counted. Brooke Grossman's only 600 votes away from Bob Rucci. Like, that's a little bit tighter of a race. And running on the Democratic platform, you have 6,000 votes coming in. I'm not sure the last.
But she would also have to leapfrog Peter Perini.
No, and I hear you. No, I'm with you. I'm just saying I think that could be a wild horse that may become a little bit closer than we thought. So we've been talking about Perini and Rucci, right?
Yes.
But there's a strong possibility that there could be a third horse in that race.
And it's not either or between Perini and Grossman, because someone probably would vote for both of them,
Which
actually.
essentially is a push that gives them each one additional
Yeah.
vote.
Yep.
So it doesn't really gain a leg up for
advantage,
Grossman.
advantage Perini.
Right.
But on the topic here, Austin was also appointed. Austin, I believe,
Right.
also owns a business.
That's right.
But I really didn't see much from Austin out there.
No.
Campaigning, because he was appointed into office. You got to show something, okay? When you get out in the community, some of the comments I had when the initial slate came out and before primaries is, I don't know these people. They have to introduce themselves. They have to get their names out there on Facebook and do things like that. So he had the advantage. I think it potentially was fumbled. Brenda, she was already on the ballot, even though she was appointed to being the delegate for the city of Hagerstown. She was on the ballot, so she wasn't going to disappear. I don't, because the ballots were already printed. So
But the Republican Central Committee was
they were
Actively,
actively because
yeah.
the advantage is, well, if she gets in, then she can't fill that term, so we get to appoint somebody. Well,
Then you would appoint Austin as the idea.
honestly, my point is, I think we have too many political appointments taking place.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and it doesn't. We have a Republican governor now, but when we had a Democratic governor, he was doing a lot of political appointments also. It's just the way the system works. I'd much rather see the individuals earn their space, and that's where I'll end off.
Yeah,
I want to
sure.
go back to Tierra Burnett because that, without the name recognition, it tells you how strong her grassroots campaign was, that she was a top vote getter. That was an amazing campaign that she ran. And then also with Takesha Martinez. I believe that Takesha was 9th or 10th in the primary. And I would love to have them on the show at some point to talk about their strategy and how they campaigned. And I think if you look at how their campaign juxtaposed to how Austin campaigned and how Shelley campaigned, it was a difference because they were everywhere. They were in the streets, they were passionate about it, and they were moving. And I feel like that Austin and Shelley relied a little bit more on name recognition because they were placed in that seat. Now, obviously for Shelley, it's going to work out just fine. But I think there's going to need to be a recalibration the next time that there's going to be a local election.
I would say with Takesha, I think what she did differently from campaign and knowing her campaign team, she turned it over to the youth.
That's it.
It was 6 college students
That's right.
who were political science majors and law majors who got involved. And they went out and they rallied the troops. They touched and knocked on 20,000 doors at some point in time throughout this campaign. And they didn't get on board until after the primaries.
Right.
So she picked up that head of steam and had this young group of people who wanted to be engaged and who wanted to make a difference, rally behind her. They ran social media, they did outreach, they did programs, they brought people out, they had their get-togethers in the community. So I think hats off to that young population that went out and represented us well.
Yeah.
100%.
Here's the other thing. This is a women's movement, right?
So you're the woman.
It's the year of the woman, right? That was a very clear message that this community sent. We're kind of tired of the same old that we've been doing.
The good old White Boys Network.
I'm glad you said it rather than me.
Okay.
Or me.
But let's look at the complexity of our city council as it stands right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have 2 female members of the city council. One is the incoming mayor.
Mm-hmm.
The other incumbent won her seat. Okay. Couple chose not to run, and then the other one lost in the election. So, and then Bob Rucci, he decided he wasn't running for mayor, and he decided to run for city council, and it may not have been the best political choice for him at this point. So we are changing to reflect more of the population within the city of Hagerstown, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. I'm a Republican. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care what your gender is. Okay? We need to know what's happening in the community. We need to be able to have our elected leaders know what's happening in the community and be able to work with the people in the community. And if these two young women who just surprised a couple of veterans can do that, then kudos to them.
You know, the one thing that I'm going to say, I believe this is a shot across the bow at the county. Those men need to get their act together, because the women are showing in this community that change is coming, and it's starting from the inside and it's filtering out. What say you about that, Andy?
Yeah, you know, maybe. I'd love to think that, but also Washington County is wickedly different than the city of Hagerstown in its policies, in its politics, and its people. So while I would like to ride this wave, this pro-woman, Year of the Woman wave, all the way into 2022, you know, we'll see. We'll see how that is. But I think you're right. I think that some folks at the commissioners need to sit up straight and figure out exactly how they're going to push back this young movement that's coming through that says we want representation at all levels, including the county level. So watch out.
Terrence.
I agree. I think there needs to be some diversity there. It's hard to think that you're not represented when decisions are being made about your livelihood. So it'd be great to see some kind of diversity, or even some inclusion of thought inside that group.
Henry, you got the last word on this.
Real quick, I hope it is a wake-up call, because our county commissioners, while they're our county commissioners, I think we could have a better slate. At the same point, I would like to see not just our county commissioners, but also the city of Hagerstown start to have geography-based seating, so that there is a county commissioner or there is a city council person responsible for a given geography. And when I pick up that phone, I don't have to call 5 county commissioners. I can call my county commissioner. There needs to be accountability, and that's what I would like to see. If we're going to do anything before the next election, I'd like to see that.
I agree with you, Henry, and we're going to start working on that immediately.
Yes, sir.
All right. That is all the time we have for tonight. We hope you will like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. More important, we hope you will join us again next week for another episode of The Flip Side.